You can't put together an anthology of writing about Shakespeare in America without it having a profound effect on your thinking about Shakespeare. I've been very lucky. A kid from Brooklyn who didn't get Shakespeare in Midwood High School in Brooklyn, an undergraduate at Columbia who never took a Shakespeare course but picked up enough Shakespeare through the corps so that when I went to see Shakespeare and get exposed to him in London in the 70s and through the 80s, I was prepared really through the terrific education I had to grapple with what these plays and brilliant productions were about. When de Tocqueville came to America, and others, one of the first things they realized was, along with the Bible, everyone had a copy of Shakespeare. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One was in an educational curriculum in which oratory and public speaking was important. Shakespeare was great. Those speeches and Julius Caesar and other plays, Macbeth as well, were wonderful. Another reason is, in the 19th century, Shakespeare was simply popular across the classes, from the highest to the lowest. Shakespeare was really part of the fabric of American culture. And in the period, say, 15 years on either side of the Civil War, it truly was a culture saturated in Shakespeare. There are a number of works that I've anthologized in this collection that have utterly changed the way I think about Shakespeare. Jane Addams' essay, A Modern Lear, is brilliant. It's 100 years ahead of its time in trying to understand the personal factors, the social and political factors that connect with a play written now over 400 years ago. So whether I'm teaching King Lear in a survey course or I'm working with, as I have been, directors of King Lear, that's going right into those classrooms and that theater experience. One of the things you discover in writing about Shakespeare in America is that it's a lot more complicated and there are things that are suppressed. To be honest, there are things that we cannot say to each other as Americans. Or when we think one thing, we're saying another. Or when we're saying something publicly, we're thinking of another privately. You get presidents in the 19th century who were strongly anti-slavery, like President Adams, who could then write an essay saying how disturbed, if not frantically disgusted he was, that Desdemona would have sex with a black man, Othello. How do you account for this split? What I'm suggesting is reading what smart, leading people and some of the best thinkers and minds in our country have written about Shakespeare tell you something about what's left unspoken, what doesn't make it into the history books, the fractures that still divide us, the issues that we're still wrestling to resolve. And looking at it through Shakespeare provides an access that formal documents and traditional narratives of American history don't permit. When Hamlet was first performed in 1600 or so, no one had seen Hamlet. And one of the exciting things about the performance of Hamlet by GIs, for GIs in the Pacific Theater was many of these men had never seen Shakespeare before. So it's not important to me that people come to Shakespeare's work having studied the work, having been taught it in junior high or high school. What matters is that impact, that collision. At that production in Hawaii for these men who had fought at some of the bloodiest battles in the Second World War, Hamlet at one point says, "Conscience doth make cowards of us all." And one of the GIs in the audience shouted back, "You got that right, buddy." That is what I live for, both in terms of what I research or recently working with a public theater production that took Much Ado to Rikers Island, watching that kind of immediate connection between inmates, many of whom had never seen Shakespeare before, who were connected to those works in ways that you can't recreate in a classroom or capture in a classroom. So I'm not really worried about how much people study Shakespeare. I'm just interested in everyone having that shot, whether it's soldiers in 1944, 45, or prisoners in Rikers Island.